All right, so we're recording in progress, and this is Alice Osborne with Wonderland Book Club. Today we have special guest star Bob O'Connell. He is a returning Wonderland Book Club featured author. His first book that we presented a couple years ago was the Flash Mob novel, and in that same, there it is, Flash Mob, we had a wonderful time, and it was around this time 2 years ago, which was kind of neat. And he's back with Cruise Mob, same characters, going deeper into their lives and misadventures. Here's a little bit about Bob. He is an award-winning playwright and obviously the author of Flash Mob, Cruise Mob, Campus Mob, The Day I Dressed Better Than My Wife, and The Death of Comedy. He's a regular contributor to the Triangle Review and has had dozens of plays performed throughout the world. And that's how I initially met Bob, through plays. And then he came to book club, and then he had a play the next day. So it was wonderful synchronicity. He is an educator and humorist, and he currently lives with his wife Teresa in Cary. They have 3 adult children, and you may follow his blog at thesmartestguyiknow.wordpress.com. So Bob, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Alice. If you had a chance to read the book, you'll notice that my books are probably classified as comedy, romance, mysteries. They all have a very heavy comedic presence, and there's a mystery element, and there's a little romance in there as well. And it follows the path of the Pastor family primarily. And the first book, Flash Mob, has a little bit of a hook in that the young couple who meets, they meet doing a flash mob dance, and the young lady, her father and grandfather are actually in the mob, so hilarity ensues. The first book was primarily about family and loyalty as a theme, I would say, and the second one was a little bit more about transition and change. And if you read the first book, you'll notice that Elmo was a problem child in the first book, was in trouble quite a bit and did some things that led to some extreme danger for the family. That being the case, he's made a lot of change into adulthood in this book as a business owner, and ends up, unexpectedly on this trip with his grandfather. A couple of the other differences, this book actually has some sexual aspects to it, which the first and the third book do not. And again, those of you who want to continue with the series, the third book, Campus Mob, basically takes place approximately 50% in the present of these other books, where the family is gathering on Long Beach Island at the Jersey Shore for a last hurrah in their beach house. And the other half of the book flashes back to when Robert was in college. His mother was dying of cancer, and he had a very strained relationship with his father, and they basically, work it out in a way that allows Robert to help his father and somehow stumble into the family business, which was something that his parents decided they did not want to have happen. Another thing that's very common in my stories, a lot of the stuff is based on real life. The 2 characters in the early part of the book, Marcus and Carter, the African-American characters, are basically my 2 best friends, Dwight and Tyrone, who I still talk to almost every day. They live in New Jersey. We've been friends for over 40 years. We did meet in college. Scotty, the young man who is dating the pastor's daughter in Tomasso in the first book, he is a educator like myself. He's Jewish with a non-Jewish name, and that background is very similar. In a slightly creepy twist, the young woman is probably more close to my daughter, Lily, and her mother Ramona is probably a combination of my wife and my middle daughter Abigail. And I'm maybe different from a lot of the other people on the call here. I never wrote a word until I was 54 years old. I didn't even think about it. I didn't dream about it. It never even was something. I was working, raising my family, minding my own business. I lost my job about 9 years ago, and I had nothing to do for a little bit. My older daughter, Lily, suggested I try writing a book. And I came up with a hook for an ending and a title and on Halloween. And 11 months later, I basically was able to hold this in my hand and say, wow, I wrote a book. And it was pretty good. Then I did the next one. And at that point, I could call myself a writer or an author. I also started a blog, and my blog pieces are mostly comedic. Some are serious, but edgy. Excuse me, in terms of race and gender and many other things, many things that I would be canceled for today. It's a little tricky, but I have a couple anthologies in there. This one, The Day I Dressed Better Than My Wife, it's the title of one of the essays, and it's a story about something that a conversation I had with my wife, never to be repeated, clearly. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, we're going to some sort of an event or affair. Oh, you're wearing that? Oh, I didn't know it was so dressy. Let me change. And then just goes on into a rabbit hole from there. The playwriting came a little bit later. I was in a writers group in South Florida where I was currently living, and it really was an absolutely wonderful experience. The thing that really, still to this day blows me away is that three of the characters in this book, the three older people at the dinner table, Larry, Paul, and Alice, are actually three people from the writers group who have been of tremendous help to me. They were in their upper 80s or 90s when I met them, and they were just so full of stories and fascinating things. And the story that Larry tells on the ship about being seated on a cruise with a German couple is actually a true story. He came to the writers group and had written an essay about this and told the story, and it was really just very moving and remarkable, and not even in the top 5 of his even more amazing stories. But I was in the middle of writing this book that takes place on a cruise ship, and I asked him, I said, Larry, this story just moved me. Do you mind if I adapt it in the book? And he said, absolutely, go ahead. I, certainly credited him in the introduction or in the, they talk about writing in a voice, and I'm a very literal person. I grew up watching TV. I have a very short attention span. But there are things that I've written that I, not figuratively, but literally, while I'm writing them and writing the dialogue, am hearing the person's voice in my head. For example, I had a story I wanted to write once, bringing to the group, which was basically a conversation between God and the devil. And it was about this guy named Bob, who was so low that the devil wanted to cast him out. This is comedic, obviously. And they met somewhere to discuss this. And I just could not figure out how to deliver it. And I spoke with Paul, and I was describing to him the story, and he just comes out and says, that sounds like a play. Now, I've been writing for a couple of years and never considered writing a play, didn't really know anything about how it was different. And I was like, well, I wrote it as a play, and we read it in the group, and Paul played God and I played the devil, and it just worked. And that was my first play. It's been performed all over the world. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I can share my screen here. I'll try this again.
Yes, you can, Bob. You can share your screen.
Okay, let me get rid of this here. Share screen and this is a couple of fellows performing the play in Manila in the Philippines. And that actually won an award. I don't know if you can do the, let's see, share screen. Let me do this again. Just try one more thing here. Are you folks able to see this video?
Not yet.
No. So let me.
You can hear it though.
All right, we'll just try one more thing here. Shrink. I got 10,000 boxes on here and I can't seem to get to the one I want. Can you see that?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yes, Bob.
We don't have the sound.
Oh, don't have the sound.
I think you need to click share computer audio under the options.
Well, all right, enough with the videos then. Basically that was an award that the play won in Manila for best in show at that particular event. And you know, the stuff just kind of kept going because this was performed in Boca Raton and we had a little party at our house because I invited a lot of people to come see it. And one of the fellows who was at the party, a young guy, a friend of one of my kids, asked, where I got the ideas for this stuff. And I, mentioned I just, get ideas and jot them down and make little notes in Notepad and just eventually get back to them and they kind of come to me. And my second play, Character Assassination, is kind of based on that, where that one's a serious play, murder mystery. It's 10 minutes. 11 minutes, and it's about an author in a mountain hideaway who has a secret, and a detective kind of tracks him down. So, the stuff just keeps coming and flowing. When I first started writing, the very first time I went to this group in Boca Raton, I read a piece from Flash Mob, the first book, and Alice, everybody's going around the room giving criticism, and this is not like North Carolina where everybody's polite and people will say, "Oh, I like this, I like this, I like this," but no one will criticize anything. In South Florida, with a relatively large Jewish group at this book group, they held nothing back. They would murder you for every comma in the wrong place. It was a great place to learn because you learn not to make mistakes. But Alice, listened to my first passage, and she said 2 words. She said, "Robert Parker." And, some people said, I could see that. And some people said, no, I don't know. But I was blown away because I had read 60 books by Robert Parker before then, 3 times as much of the next most prolific author. And I was a big fan. And it was fascinating to me that I could have read all these books, picked up a style of dialogue, and put it in my first, 3 or 4 chapters of my first book, and have somebody sharp enough to pick that out and recognize it. It really was mind-blowing. And these people were absolutely wonderful. And again, I made them characters in the book. As a matter of fact, one short story that I wrote, which is somewhere on my blog, is a story called Chances of a Lifetime. And it is 6 vignettes. I was at my group once and Alice was having trouble with her printer. She couldn't print something the right way. And of course, everybody's kibitzing in. You got to click this, you got to hit that, you got to do that. And at one point, Paul says, you know what, I'll come by and take a look at it. So that was it, simple conversation. But when I heard that, it just kind of struck me as that she's a woman, he's a man, and is it possible that you could have a very standard sitcom story where a woman claims to have a problem so that a man comes over to help? It's very dated and very offensive and obnoxious, but that's what popped into my head. And then I thought about it and said, boy, they're talking about a printer today, but what would have been the catalyst if they had done this 20 years ago or 40 years ago or 60 years ago? And I wrote this story with these 6 separate vignettes about a kid running down the street to play stickball with his friends in Brooklyn, who comes upon a young lady who has a stone stuck in her skate, and he stops to help her. And over the course of the next 60 years, they have 5 more chance meetings where they keep kind of stumble upon each other. One to fix a refrigerator, another one a TV, another one stuck on the side of the road with a car, another one a vending machine that's acting up, and finally a tennis net at a retirement community in South Florida after they both retired and moved from New York. And it's a very, very sweet story. And at the very end, the last line, last 2 lines, as Paul finally just says, Alice, after, would it be okay if I asked you to get a cup of coffee? And she says, oh, Paulie, I thought you'd never ask. And it was so heavily inspired by, these 2 people. And again, while I'm writing it, literally hearing their voice in my head doing the dialogue. You also may have noticed from reading the book that I write a lot of dialogue, and that tends to be a specialty of mine, which is why I'm pretty good at writing plays. I think I'm able to capture the way people communicate and the way they interact in a real way, where people can identify with the characters, and so that kind of helps. I know sometimes it's a little difficult to read that because, I had to really retake 7th grade English when I started writing and editing, because the quotations and the commas and the he said and she said and they said, I'm reading all about it, and I don't want, that to be in the books terribly. But again, another thing that I've done is borrow heavily. When I wrote, a novel, I looked at one of Robert Parker's novels and formatted it the same way. When I wrote a humor anthology, I looked at David Sedaris's books and used that as a guide for formatting those books. It's been a lot of fun. I like family humor. The first book, there's a lot of scenes where people are eating and they're at the table and they're just discussing and having a normal banter. There's a lot of sibling related banter. People with a common history, can joke around but not be mean necessarily. And then, gets reined in. At one point, Elmo makes what he thinks is a joke about his gay brother that his grandfather thinks is out of bounds, and lets him know in no uncertain terms that that's the last time we're going to hear that. And, they develop an understanding without being mean or, accusatory. I have been told by some people that many or all of the characters in my book speak with the same voice. That may be the case. It's my voice. It doesn't surprise me. I like people in books, at least in my books, to be a little better than people are in real life. I mean, we're going through stuff now that's just a total meltdown of society. And, you know, I stopped writing the blog a year and a half ago. I only wrote something a couple days ago, I guess Monday, for the first time in about a year and a half. I haven't been able to focus on writing for a couple reasons. But, you know, people are telling me, oh, write about Trump, write about the pandemic, write about this, write about that. It's like, man, you know, I'm angry enough watching the news. I don't need to add to the pile of noise and hatred. Um, I want something to be light. So I'm really hoping that those of you who read the book, you know, had a week or so of just, you know, unimportance and just fun and laughter and smiling and saying, you know, I get this. This is kind of cool. In terms of the venue itself, the cruise ship, I have been with my wife and a couple of friends and my kids on about, I don't know, 10 or 12 cruises over the years. And we really enjoy them. So those of you who've been on a cruise ship, this is very, very accurate in terms of the structure of the ship. It's based primarily on the Oasis of the Seas and the Royal Caribbean fleet. I basically, you know, just created a different line with the whole Spanish theme, but in terms of the rooms and the locations and the artwork and everything, when I go on a cruise, I like to look at people's name tags and see where they're from and talk to them about that and understand how the cruise ship works. So most of that stuff's pretty accurate. In terms of research, you know, I have a book I started that takes place in 1858 that I just can't push myself to continue because it's going to take so much work to research what was happening back then. This is easy research. I mean, I'm cruising along and I get to somebody from Jamaica or the Ukraine and I need to give them a name. And it's like, well, I don't want to have every Russian person be Igor, and I don't want it to be something so obscure. I want it to flow so people can keep reading and get it. So I'll just open up Google and type in top 100 female Russian names. And I will kind of go down the list and look to see what grabs me that sounds not too obvious, but not too obscure and just sounds right. A lot of the little Italian things, the toasts, you know, I'm a list of Italian toasts, translations, what works, what doesn't, what would they say, what would they drink? And that part I find a lot of fun. You know, the research into the artist Tomasso, that's all, you know, a real artist and real stuff, and it's a common practice for him to be copied. Oh, and by the way, Alice, you know what? You asked me the other night about the third amateur painting. It was not what I said. It was the security guard brought that to the guy at the auction, and he had it, and obviously realized it was fake. So it basically stayed with him, was probably destroyed, but that's where that one went. So that's what happened to the third painting. I actually went back and looked at it because I was confused, and the girl at the end gave him the family painting that she had done.
Okay, so she did 2 paintings.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, and you know, I have a lot of friends who go on cruise ships, and they take my book and take pictures of them. This actually is a fake picture, but this is the captain of the Costa Concordia that fell over in Italy a few years back. But I stole the captain here and had him promote my book illegally or inappropriately. I close this damn thing. I think there I am. Okay. Let's see. So I talked about, is there anybody have any questions? Anything they want to ask me? Okay, I see.
Mary, go ahead. You're muted, Mary. You're muted, Mary.
Still muted.
There.
There you are. Okay, there you are.
Bob, just your book was a hoot. I just absolutely, I mean, I was reading it at night and I'm building an addition onto my daughter's home for myself. And so I'm down in the fourth bedroom in the basement. And honestly and truly, I put a pillow over my face because I was laughing so hard at the place in the airport where Grandpa is trying to get Elmo onto the plane like an old man. And he goes, of course, into the bathroom.
Yeah.
That was just nuts. I mean, I just really got a charge out of that. But anyway, it was just so much fun. But I'm really curious as far as you're looking at other writers' genres. Is this something that everybody tends to do, or is this kind of unique to you?
I wish I knew. I mean, that was a very funny scene, and it was interesting to write because they had to get through security without credentials.
It was hysterical.
And I knew that they had to do that without having any idea how they would do it. So I had to basically break it down into step by step, what would work and what wouldn't work. And I was very fortunate to come up with something absolutely silly and ridiculous, but thinking about the guy in security and how this would work and what would work. But the other aspect of that, which is a constant theme throughout the book, is just what a ridiculously cool customer Grandpa actually is.
Yeah.
He doesn't even have a plan B, and it's like, let's work the problem. Let me observe. Let's see this. Let's see that. Some of it's planned, some of it's not. And obviously some of it is, literary license. Like they also are very lucky. I mean, another favorite scene of mine in this book is the phone call that goes through 9 people from the Caribbean to New Jersey to another place in New Jersey to 2 more places in New Jersey to Boston and to Cambridge, and connects 8 or 9 people. And nobody's completely sure what's happening, but the family members are not terribly surprised because this is the kind of stuff that happens to pop up. And I'm very happy to say that Brad is a much bigger character in the third book because he comes to the family, shore house, and also, as he and Pep are getting closer together and dating at that point. He just adds another dynamic. I also have some level of sports in all my books. They play flag football in the first book as a minor scene, but does set some stuff and works. And there's some basketball on the ship in this one. And in the third book, the guys go out for a round of golf. So I guess you could also say that there's kind of a male component to these things, that a lot of the cozy mysteries, which this is not, but are very female centric. And this, without being macho and hard-boiled detective-y, still has, a lot of male things in it. But I'm glad you thought it was a hoot, because I sometimes I'd be writing it in bed at night and I'd be typing something and I'd start laughing, and my wife was like, "Are you okay?" It's like, "You're not laughing again, are you?" And I'm like, I can't help it. It's just funny.
Well, that was the thing. I forget reading it for a week. I read it in 2 nights because the second night I just read it until 4 o'clock in the morning because I wanted to get to the end. It was so fun. So great, just a great fun time.
There's also, as an amateur writer, it's pretty remarkable. When I got to the end of the second book, it was within 3 pages in length of the first book without making any effort to do so. And the third book was also very, very close to the same. They just kind of opened up and resolved themselves and, moved along. Actually, Grandpa is in the third book very little, he is as a younger man. So it provides some background there. So again, 99 cents on Kindle. Feel free to, jump into that if you liked it.
Well, and you also gave us those brown suede shoes when you remember last time and said, write a story. And I started outlining it because I really had planned on doing it, but I had a beloved friend who was critically ill and did end up going home to be with the Lord. So I've been up and back and forth to Virginia for 3 weeks, but I'm still working on that. So I'm going to get it to you.
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to talk about more today, because you are the people who I can hopefully get to contribute to this sort of thing. But I figure I'll wrap up the other stuff first. And again, as I've been on many cruises, where's the share thing? Share screen. Just a couple other pictures here. The last cruise I was on, this is the Flow Rider, which is a rather remarkable device that allows you to surf on a ship. And after the second formal night, I had a tuxedo that I had purchased in a thrift store, not unlike Elmo's. And I actually went around the ship and did, my friend Ed was with me, and he took pictures of me doing everything with a tuxedo on, running on the track, using the exercise equipment, playing sports, eventually ending up in the pool. And I actually was the first person ever to go on the Flow Rider in a tuxedo. So, it's, again, I'm very much into having fun. And, sometimes, getting stuff up in lights. This was a couple of years ago. We had a play that was performed at the Cary Theater. This was a play I wrote. Trying to think what the name of it is. I can't even remember. Basically, it was the first 4 presidents getting together to watch a football game. It's Washington, Jefferson, Adams, and Madison. And it's a comedy. And basically, it won Best in Snow at a festival in Minnesota, I believe, or Wisconsin. It was Wisconsin. And it's called Game Time. And unfortunately, some of these plays I barely have any pictures of or any video of, and some of them I have quite a bit. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And again, here I am running on the ship on the track with my wife. I gotta do the share screen thing. So, that's the kind of ridiculous stuff that I do for fun. Now, I'll come back to these, but all right. Are the shoes on the screen?
Not yet. Not yet, Bob.
Now you can see them,
They are
right?
on the screen now.
Okay, just a little background here. I talked at the last meeting or a recent meeting about this, but I had found this pair of shoes in a thrift store, and I don't have anything in the picture to show you the size, but they're roughly a size 2 or 3, which would be worn by a 1 to 2.5 year old. And they're so incredibly worn that they were obviously worn by dozens and dozens of children over decades, because you just cannot wear out a pair of leather shoes that quickly. And the average kid at that age wears a pair of shoes for 4 to 6 months before they grow out of them. And they basically just spoke to me. So I paid my 50 cents and bought them and had them on a shelf trying to figure out what to do. And I have a lot of anthology books. Again, back to my short attention span, I was currently reading a book that's edited by a guy named Otto Penzler, who basically does this. He edits anthologies, and this one was about murder mysteries related to basketball. He also has tennis mysteries and golf mysteries, and he's got mysteries from mystery authors talking about their characters. I have anthologies about sports stuff. I have anthologies about science fiction. And, basically somebody asks a bunch of their friends to write short stories with a theme and puts them together. So I figured that I have some ISBN numbers burning a hole in my pocket. And, making my own cover art and doing all the design, it will cost me virtually nothing to produce a book at this point. So I decided to be editor and ask people to write short stories that have something to do with these shoes. And the only three requirements are the story has to include where the family got the shoes, how the family got rid of the shoes, and just mention who wore the shoes. Anything else is in bounds. And I used examples. As a matter of fact, I was, driving to the dentist about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and I came up with this idea of a story about a couple of parents burying their child who died of diphtheria in the 50s or something like that. And when the mother asked to have the coffin opened one more time to see her baby, she noticed the shoes were missing, and she was ready to strangle the funeral director. And her husband broke down and told her that he needed to sell the shoes to buy a rosary for his kid to be buried with. Very O. Henry stuff, nothing massive, but I'm picturing these shoes coming across on a ship to Ellis Island, or in a basement hiding from Nazis, or a kid takes his first steps in these shoes, and then he's a late developer, but then later wins an Olympic gold medal doing something or other. Anything under the sun, and giving a chance for not only writers, but also amateurs who have never been published to get their name and a credit in a book. Anyhow, I'd like to read a couple things real quick here, because after sending this out, I had some people kind of miss the boat on the theme. And also a friend of mine gave me an idea for a story that I decided would make a perfect origin story. So I ended up writing what will probably be the first chapter in this book, but then the rest will all be from other people. But I would like to, first of all, read, this is a draft. So if it stinks, it's a draft. This is the introduction that will go in the book. Why shoes, and why these particular shoes? Shoes have been featured in literature and the arts since people have been wearing shoes. Hobson's Choice, The Red Shoes, Tests of the D'Urbervilles, Crime and Punishment are all examples of works featuring shoes. For children, we have The Wizard of Oz, Cinderella, The Elves and the Shoemaker. There was even an old woman living in one. Music gives us These Boots Are Made for Walking, Blue Suede Shoes, and the rather sappy The Christmas Shoes. Film has brought us Kinky Boots and Like Mike. One legendary shoe story has none other than Ernest Hemingway challenging a group of fellow writers that he could write a story in 6 words, including a beginning, middle, and an end that would make the reader cry. Legend has it that he scrawled the following on a napkin: "For sale, baby shoes, never worn," and collected on the bed. There is no actual evidence that this event ever happened, but you must admit it's a pretty good story in itself. In terms of this pair of shoes depicted on the cover, I found them while browsing a thrift store passing through Wilmington, North Carolina. I was immediately taken by the incredible wear in these shoes. They reminded me of shoes that might have been worn by a man walking the streets during the Great Depression looking for work. Only these were the shoes of a small child. I plopped down my 50 cents plus tax, thinking that eventually these shoes might reveal a story. That stuff I already talked about. Okay. Both of the soles have holes, including quite large Charlie Chaplin-esque one on the left shoe. The wear on these is so severe that I assume that these shoes have been worn by dozens of children over the course of several decades. This history is what led me to develop this anthology. I asked many of my friends and acquaintances, both writers and non-writers, to contribute stories about the families that have passed these shoes along across the decades. How did they get them? Who wore them? How were they passed on? These simple questions were speculated upon by the contributors herein. I hope this can be looked upon as a history of nearly a century of the life of these shoes, but more importantly, a history of families. So that's the general idea of how that would go. And again, I normally would, this is 5.5 pages, so it's not too long, but my friend Judy Dove, she told me about a incident that happened in North Carolina in 1929, and she was going to use the family as a family that passed these shoes on to multiple generations. But I pointed out that that might go too far back for these shoes, And also I envisioned a better story, and she moved on to something else, thankfully, because I used this story to be the starting point of where the shoes came from, brand new, and how they were passed on. So if you can stomach, 10 minutes of me reading the story, I will give you an idea, and then hopefully be able to engage many of you into contributing. Dale Moody strides through the automatic door at the entrance to the Shenandoah Convalescent Home. He heads toward the reception window, expecting the usual cold exchange with the officious woman at the desk. This time, however, she immediately smiles at him and even adds a little wave before returning to her paperwork. He suddenly realizes that her change in demeanor is due to him arriving in his full police uniform. Actually, this is the first place he has ever been while wearing the uniform, as it was only an hour ago that he had been sworn in as a deputy in the Rockland County Sheriff's Department. He smiles inwardly at the thought that his unmolested entry into his grandfather's ward is his first perk received due to his new promotion. Dale gives a light knock while peeking into the open door of his grandfather's single room. "Chief, are you up for visitors?" he asks. He and everyone else on the planet calls the old man Chief. Clevin Moody served as chief of the nearby Harrisonburg Police Department for some 30 years prior to his retirement, brought about due to advanced emphysema. The chief reaches for the remote and shuts off the rerun of the Donna Reed show he was half watching. "Dale, is that you? You know I was always ready for a visit from my grandson. Well, why the hell are you hiding out in the hallway? Are you coming in or what, boy?" asked Chief. Dale walks in as erect as a man can be. He then makes a crisp parade left turn and gives the chief a salute. The chief is momentarily stunned, but recovers quickly to straighten up his bed. He proudly returns the salute. "Deputy Dale Moody reporting for duty, sir," says Dale. "Dear God," is all the chief can get out before fumbling. Pardon me. Sorry about that. On my COVID calls. Okay. Dale strikes an at-ease pose before the chief recovers enough to say, "Just sit the hell down, boy, unless you got too much starch in that new monkey suit of yours." Dale laughs and sits in the chair next to his grandfather's bed. Dale has been pretty much raised by the chief and his Nana Doralee, along with his mother Sandy. "There seems to be less machines than last time, Chief. Can I take this as a good sign?" asked Dale. "Yes and no, son. On the plus side, I'm no longer near imminent death, but the lung stuff ain't going away. The smoking took care of that. I'm glad you never got hooked. Those cancer sticks took my Doralee, and I'm a bit worried about your mama as well." "I haven't smoked a one since Nana died. It was tough when I did my tour. Smoking is about the only thing we had to do in Nam other than surviving. But I made a promise to Nana, and hey, we all got to die of something. She had a great life, and so did I. I expect the same from you. So it seems that you got yourself a new job, if I heard you right. Tell me about it." "Come on, Chief, you got me into the training program. You knew this was coming. I just wanted you to be the first person I came to see after the ceremony." "Dale, you know I wanted to be there." "Of course, Chief, but I understand. It was a small room and your blubbering would have drowned out the sheriff. Might have been a public service by my reckoning. He's really a good man. I wouldn't be working for him otherwise. You just wanted me to go to Harrisonburg. At first, maybe, but I did leave a pretty big shadow. Better you should make your own legacy." "I appreciate that, Chief. Dean, you know the first thing I thought when you walked in here? That I finally caught up with you for all those unpaid parking tickets? Boy, I'm trying to be serious. You know that laughter uses this oxygen up faster. I literally cannot afford to be amused anymore. What I wanted to say was that you reminded me so much of your daddy when you came in here." "So weeping doesn't use extra oxygen?" "It's not sadness, son. It's the deepest pride you can experience. You know, the last time I saw your daddy before he shipped out to Korea, he was in uniform. I wish I'd gotten to know him. I was only 2. It was hard, no doubt, but we endured. It was a lot harder watching you go off to Vietnam. I had a bad birthday in a draft lottery. It was unfortunate, but it was my duty to serve. You and 500,000 other boys. I hear they're down to about 60,000 now. Yes, and they're dying at the same rate. We can't seem to win and we can't seem to lose. I still have friends there. Don't remind me. I supported Eisenhower and Nixon both. Let's just say that the cost of freedom is high. Well, your boy looks like he's going to have 4 more years to get out of this mess. Must be tough to live with regrets. The chief looks at Dale for a moment and then looks up at the ceiling as though seeking for something. Chief, asked Dale, are you all right? You need some help? The chief closes his eyes and takes a deep pull of the oxygen. Dale, I'm fine, but there's something I need to share with you. Do you have some time? Sure, Chief. I mean, I'm meeting Ellie for dinner, but that's not for about 5 hours. Now you have me worried. No, son, it's nothing to worry about. It's just something I've been carrying around for a long time. And now that you're beginning your career in law enforcement, I think it's time I share this with you. Wait, you mean whatever this is, Nana didn't know? That is correct, but that is my shame. Let me get through it and you may understand. May understand? Gee whiz, Chief. I guess you better get started. The chief picks up a device attached to the bed and manipulates a button. It causes the back of the bed to rise, allowing him to a full sitting position. Close the door, the chief says. Dale shrugs, rises, and shuts the door. Okay, says Chief, it's December of 1929. Right after the stock market crash? Dale, let me get through this. Try to save your questions until the end. And by the way, that's also a good technique when interviewing a witness or a suspect. Let them talk. Sorry, Chief. And they did address that in my training. All right. In 1929, I was in my 4th year as an officer in the Forsyth County Police Department in North Carolina. We also covered Stokes County as they shared some unincorporated land. Sorry, Chief, I hate to interrupt, but I don't know where this is, or quite frankly, that you ever lived outside of Virginia. Yeah, I guess it's more background as an order. Forsyth County includes and is mostly north of Winston-Salem. It was much smaller then, but might have been the largest city in North Carolina at the time. I was primarily assigned to the north because I was one of the newer guys. I started out about the same age you are now. Anyhow, there was a small town called Germantown, about 15 miles to the north. I think there's still less than 800 people living there. And is your family from there? Asked Dale. Not really, says Chief. We were from the Shenandoah Valley. I ended up there for work. Your Nana wasn't happy about leaving her family farm, but we managed. Anyhow, there was this family in Germantown named Lawson. Charles was his name, and he had a wife and 7 kids. What happened here? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed something. That's a lot of detail to remember from some 40 plus years ago. There are some things you never forget. A few days before Christmas, this guy Lawson takes his whole family on a shopping spree, all for new outfits. This might be pretty common these days, but for a sharecropper in 1929, it was unheard of. You mean after the crash? Actually, not so much. While people in New York and Chicago were jumping out of buildings, the crash, at least at first, had little effect in the rural South. Sure, prices were starting to go up, but here people invested in cotton and peanuts and tobacco and the like. Bad weather had a bigger effect on our economy. Still, Lawson's spending was a bit of a red flag. He also had a professional photographer take a picture of the entire family in their new duds. Well, you did say it was before Christmas. You had my picture taken every Christmas. Sure, with Earl Minkins and his ratty old Santa suit down at the 5 and Dime. I think one time we took you and your mama to the Sears in Richmond, but that's hardly a professional studio. Okay, Chief, I see what you're saying. Maybe he had a good year and he was just blowing his wad of cash. Maybe he was a bootlegger. Listen up, kid. You ain't Perry Mason or even Ironside yet, but you will be. Let me finish. Dale waits for his father to continue. So it's Christmas, and I'm on duty being a low man and all, and we get a call from the Lawson farm. It's just really a shack and tobacco barn. It seems some of the neighbors came by to pay their holiday respects and came upon a grisly scene. It appeared that someone had killed the entire family. Geez, Chief. It was bad, son. They were all dressed up. Most were shot, but some appeared to have been bashed in the head. Kids? Yep. Marie was 17, Carrie was 12, Maybelle 7, James 4, Raymond 2, and there was a baby named Mary Lou, about 6 months plus. Of course, the wife, Fanny, Dale is counting on his fingers. Wait, that's only 6. You said there were 7 kids. Where's the father? Good catch, son. Attention to detail is a massive asset for a peace officer. Is this supposed to be some sort of a test? No, not at all. Just a compliment. Arthur 16 was not at the scene. So he did it? Slow down, kiddo. Impatience is not an asset for a cop. No, we found out that the father sent the oldest son on an errand before the shooting started. We found the father in the woods a few hours later. He clearly had shot himself. And no one reported the gunshots? Everybody hunted for food in rural areas back then, even on Christmas. It just wasn't that unusual. Any speculation why you sent the boy away? Maybe. We had the family photo. Even at 16, Arthur was already a man. He was quite a bit taller and probably stronger than his father. He also was apparently a crack shot when rabbit hunting. His father probably was worried the kid would stop him. I guess that's as good a reason as any. So I assume that you were sharing this story to prepare me for the potential horrors of police work? Not in the least. While this was the worst I personally ever experienced, particularly because of the children, I know you saw much worse in combat. I do occasionally watch the news, you know. Okay, patience. I get it. Will you get to the point when you're you'll get to the point when you're ready. Thank you, Dale. This does have to do with me being an officer and you being an officer. I couldn't care less why some maniac chose to wipe out his family. The shopping spree implies premeditation, but who the hell knows? You know, they're all buried in the same plot with a shared tombstone, says the chief with a shudder. Dale waits while the chief lets out a sigh. Your Nana's dad took ill and the depression was starting. Doralee and I moved back to the family farm with your daddy. I had enough experience to get the job in Harrisburg, and the rest is history. A fine history, to be sure, Chief. Not completely, son. You see, I always prided myself on being a stand-up cop with no stomach for corruption. But one time, and just one time, I took a liberty. Dale quietly waits for his grandfather to continue at his own pace. We were processing the scene at the Lawson house. Of course, I was shaky and horrified and sick. I could not stop looking at Raymond in his new outfit. He was the same age as my boy, your father. Like most families at the time, your Nana and I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I couldn't stop looking at Raymond's shoes. They were brand new. They were completely leather, better than any shoes I had ever owned. You could actually smell the leather over the lingering fireplace, smoke, and gunpowder. Geez, Grandpa, you don't have to. Let me finish. I need to get it out, and you need to hear it. It was Christmas. We were poor. The poor boy was wearing these shoes and would never wear them again. No one would. I saw that I was alone in the room, and God help me, I slipped Raymond's shoes off of his feet. The chief begins to sob. Dale goes to him and wraps him in his arms. It's okay, Chief. No, it's not okay. Not then and not now. I need you to know that. I actually stopped before putting the shoes in my pocket. You know what I did? I licked my thumb and wiped a spot of blood off one of the shoes. And then you gave them to my father? Oh, no, never. I pocketed the shoes and brought them home and hid them in the closet. I couldn't look at them. I was haunted. A few weeks later, I had to go to Raleigh for some sort of training. I took the shoes and put them in a church box that I passed. I hoped someone could use them, but not me or my family. I never felt haunted by poor Raymond or anything like that, but no, I was haunted by my weakness, how easy it was to cheat and to take advantage of my position. I never told a soul this story before, not even your Nana, and I'm hoping this will help you avoid ever having to go through the same guilt and shame. Grandpa, you've always been my hero, and you are even more so now. This is an amazing gift for you to share with me, and I swear I'll carry it with me. Please, Chief, it's time to forgive yourself. Dale, I'm not sure forgiveness is appropriate for people in our business. This terrible act on my part helped form who I was as a cop and a parent. Passing this message on to me, at least, is far more valuable than forgiveness. You're an interesting individual, Chief. If that is all the moralizing for the day, I'd better go get ready to meet Ellie. You gonna be okay? Absolutely, son. I feel like a load has been lifted. Even this oxygen smells a bit sweeter. You be nice to that girl of yours. I think Ellie is a keeper. Don't screw it up. No chance, Chief. But I am curious, though. About what? What do you suppose ever happened to those shoes? Chief shrugs and says, who knows, son? Who knows? So, I think, anyhow, I had, found out about the Lawson family murders, which is a true story. I looked it up. And it's actually the picture of the family is on Wikipedia. And Raymond is a 2-year-old boy who would be perfect of the size to wear these shoes. I know he had new shoes, and it just seemed like a perfect place to start the story based on the age of the shoes and everything else. And, tried to come up with something that was about family and forgiveness and about, every other things, morality, and didn't focus completely on the shoes much at all. But again, had the components, where the shoes came from, where they went, and, something about that, which is basically kind of the theme of the anthology. So if anybody wants to give it a try and write a short story, a poem, a song, anything, anywhere from, half a page to 25, 30 pages, I would be very interested in including it in the anthology and publishing it. It would be another writer's credit for you and a chance to try something different.
I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
My first question would be, if the stories supposed to be consecutive? So like, that the chief lost the shoes. So, okay, so now story 2 would kind of pick up from a family who maybe found the shoes, or, whatever. Are they supposed to kind of follow in order with each other?
In general, no.
Okay.
It would be, if I wanted to have a chronology of following the shoes, I would, basically write a novel and do that. The idea of the anthology, besides the fact having different voices and different people writing the stuff, also is a matter of, out of the dozens and dozens of kids who wore these shoes over the years, it's pretty random. Now, I can't say as editor that I might not try to put the stories in some sort of chronological order, but not to seam them together as a full tapestry. It's basically, it's like finding, an old document where you have pieces of it. And, you can kind of piece together a thread, but not a complete thread. So in general, no, but the idea is that anywhere along the way, these shoes, I have a lot of friends from other countries, and people are interested in writing immigrant stories or stories about, the shoes in Haiti or in India or in Germany. And that certainly can happen because, once they're on somebody's feet or in a mailbox, they can go anywhere. And the reality is that no one's wearing these shoes for more than 6 months. A family might have them for a few years. I had another friend who suggested having the shoes, in an orphanage for, 30 years and worn by, 50 kids. The problem with that is that you can't really write about the person wearing the shoes because they're too young to have vivid memories. They barely speak. Kids that age have a vocabulary about, 50 words. So it's really about, the family aspect. So yeah, anything is in bounds, basically. It can be old, new, makes no difference.
Okay. Yeah, that answers my question, because I was thinking, well, how are we going to have, a connection between all these stories? Because if one person finds them and then, the person before them lost them, that, I was just trying to see how it connect, but your explanation made sense. So
Okay.
I appreciate that. The other question I have, is there any sort of requirement as far as, like, you typically write in present tense? Would you prefer the stories to be written in present tense? Does it matter? Or
Well, this particular story takes place in around 1972, when the grandfather is near the end, and because I wanted to bridge it, I had to work backwards. I actually made a spreadsheet that had the date of the murders, the age of the guy, and calculated out in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and had to, originally it was going to be a son. Then I'm like, you know what, the grandson works better because of the age, and um, it's really pretty much open to anything. It really makes no difference whatsoever because they're independent stories.
okay.
And and also the introduction that I had read earlier, after that point, then there would be a bit about the contributors. These contributors are, so-and-so, a teacher from blah, 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 or so-and-so, an author who's done this, or this is somebody else's first effort. I don't know.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, I guess I would probably like something, veteran writers don't need much editing. I might have to look and say, could you make this in Brooklyn rather than Chicago for continuity's sake, or some other little thing. But my guess is I'm going to have virtually no editing for veterans. For new people, I might, give them more information to guide them. But I already received a couple stories that didn't mention the shoes at all. And it's like, oh, I have this story, put it in your anthology. I'm like, it's going to be a problem. So, and I also had one friend who I sent the introduction. He said, I could not possibly be less interested in the path of these shoes. I don't know why anybody would buy it. I'm like, well, thankfully I'm an author, so I know that nobody's going to buy it. So it's not, I'm not doing this to make money.
One more question.
Yeah.
How would we send the stories to you?
My email should be floating around somewhere, but
Okay, because I looked at the meetup page and I did not see it.
It was at the end of the
Okay.
whole thing.
Oh, yep, it was. No,
shit.
no, it says email masked. Maybe because I'm not a part of the meetup Wonderland group.
Can you read the group chat?
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
just put his email in there.
Yeah, oconman1@gmail.com. And
Okay.
again, any ideas or suggestions, or, I'm working on this. Basically, I wanted to have this done if I get enough stories before Christmas, which means I'd kind of like to have, drafts by the end of September, if possible. But I mean, if you're working on something and you're, backed up, certainly just let me know. If you're working on the basement bedroom, or taking a trip to whatever, and again, with COVID, I might not be living next week, so who knows?
I was thinking too, Bob, about one of my favorite lines in Silence of the Lambs, when Hannibal says to Clarice, "Oh, you're wearing those cheap shoes," and I could smell, and it just hurt me so much, because she was trying so hard, and and then she's wearing shoes that she can't afford, and it just hurt my feelings. What a mean bastard. I mean, but it told me everything about her, and it told me everything about him in that one line. And I think about it almost every day, about the cheap shoes. And I'm like, oh, do I have cheap shoes? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I didn't, I'm always thinking like, well, people are looking at my shoes. And my mom always said I had to shine my shoes. So it was anyway, that was
my friend Tyrone. He's got a rule that, like, if he sees a panhandler and he would be considering giving him money, first thing he does is check the guy's shoes. If the guy has better shoes than Tyrone has, he's not getting any money. Which is just, again, is always, something weird. And again, the fact that I just saw them and they just, it was the hole in the bottom that it just reminded me of, I don't know, probably either Charlie Chaplin or Three Stooges or somebody. These guys would be walking around and they would have their toes sticking out of a hole in the shoe, or they'd be making soup out of a shoe. And I just never seen anything so amazingly worn that, no one had gotten fixed in the, 50 years that these shoes were floating around.
Yeah, my dad had big holes in his shoes, and he would put glue in the holes to keep it together, because he said, I'm a government worker, I can't afford shoes. But we would, us kids would have new shoes and new clothes.
Yeah, well, again, it's different strokes for different folks, and and again, I had just heard about these Lawson family murders and thought it would be a, little Raymond wearing the shoes. And again, I purposely did not, get into who Raymond was, or the family, or what their motivation was, or anything. because, you know, by the time these shoes enter the picture, the kid's already gone.
That's right.
But
Bob, I gather that the story has to be about this particular pair of shoes.
yes, because of the size and the
Because I know a true story about a family that used the same pair of shoes, and the shoes had holes in them, and they used cardboard to
Yeah.
fill up the holes. But it was the older children. It was children 7 or 8 years old. Not
again, you know, as a writer, you can take any idea and just adapt it to younger. You know, again, I also, I mean, the shoes did not have holes in them for most of their life. It was later. And my understanding is kids at that age spend much more, a higher percentage of their time indoors than outdoors, and not walking around in the street on asphalt or concrete. And again, I you know, I'm already picturing a kid who's hiding in a basement with a concrete floor, hiding from the Nazis. Could have worn these shoes. You know, and again, where they went and how, all we know is they ended up in a church box somewhere in the Raleigh area. And you don't have to have gotten them from there. You could have got them anywhere. I got them in a thrift store. I imagine most of these, you know, since they were better shoes, a well-to-do family passing them on to the maid or cook in a household when the kid gets new shoes. Any of those things are inbounds. So, you know, we'll see what happens. I really look forward to, you know, seeing if you folks want to give it a try. Hopefully it'll be fun. Anybody have any more questions about either the anthology or the novels?
Yeah, let's talk about more about Cruise Mob.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paget.
Bob, I just want to say that you are so good. Your presentations are just as much fun as your books, and I sure did enjoy this. I have a lot of questions, but I'll just, one thing Laurel brought up is that you write in present tense.
Right.
And a lot of dialogue, which I noticed back when I read Flash Mob.
Mm-hmm.
I write a lot of dialogue. I thought maybe the present tense and the dialogue came from your playwriting, but you say that came later.
Yeah, probably as a result of writing in that style, a lot of the stuff I write turned out to be, you know, play oriented. And again, you know, like the various plays, I have things to say about, you know, gender. You know, Boy Meets Boy is a short play I wrote about a playwriting team. One is straight and one is gay, and they're needling each other about what's the next thing to write, and, you know, go down a rabbit hole, and then, you know, at the end, you know, decide that, hey, this stuff we're talking about actually would be a good play. You know, 9 Angry Men, you know, will never be produced because it has a cast of 11, and it's a, you know, a 7-minute play, and it's all male because it's basically a bunch of guys meeting for a minyan in a synagogue, and a troubled kid comes in, and the rabbi stays out of the room. All the group comes in, are complaining about the rabbi, but they help the kid. And at the end, the rabbi comes in and explains to a kid who's practicing for his bar mitzvah that, you know, the role of the rabbi is to build the community. And like, what would have happened if I had come in sooner? Rabbi, do this. Rabbi, what should we do? And they worked it out themselves and were a community. And, you know, and again, most of my stuff ends up with weeping at the end. You know,
I wanted you to know that I enjoy the format. I love the present tense. It's different. And I love dialogue, but I also wanted to mention something about your cover designs. They're the same. Is Robert Berger, your designer, a friend of yours?
My first cousin, Beth, it's her husband. He's an artist. And, you know, again, I'll take luck over anything. I'm just a lucky individual. And I know that he is an artist, and he used to do like a lot of airbrush stuff. And he was very clever because when the electronic stuff came out, he took all his airbrush stuff and just sold it and shifted over to the tablet, the computer, because he does commercial work. And it was like, man, you spend so much time doing this stuff with your hands and crafting. And he says, you know what? You can't sell this stuff. You do book covers, you do other stuff. So I knew somebody who actually did book covers, and I kind of went up to him and said, look, I want something that's got this mob in the center with this O. And in the first book, in Flash Mob, there's a vault cover in the center spot. And in the second book, there's a porthole with a ship going by. And the third book, since it takes place on a college campus, there's a ring on there, a class ring, which has something in Latin on it, which is basically like blood and loyalty and something that I researched. And if I ever get around to writing the fourth book, it's going to be Wedding Mob, and it'll have more of a black and white cover. And basically, I made his life easier, and he made my life easier, because I wanted to have, a nice graphic look. And first time, right out of the box, he did a draft and came up with the first picture, and it was perfect. I mean, the red beret is a small story theme in the first book. She's wearing the red beret. Everything else is pretty standard. In the second book, since they're on a cruise, he's wearing a tuxedo and she's wearing kind of a little bit of a cruisy thing. But I mean, he didn't really have to change anything except a few small details. And in the third book, she's wearing a graduation gown, and he's back to wearing the regular suit. I imagine in the fourth book, which I probably should ask him to do just in case I write it, she'll be wearing a wedding gown and he'll be back in a tuxedo, which he already has. And I got to figure out what to put in the center, either a wedding ring or something else that'll fit there. But he's an artist, and didn't cost me a cent. It's,
really clever. And since Tracy's not here, I get to ask her question. What was your favorite sentence in your book? Favorite sentence or favorite passage in your book?
Boy, I mean, I obviously write comedy, and I don't know if there's one particular sentence, but the punchline, the part that makes me, while I'm reading it, even after I've written it and read it 10 times and with editing 50 times, that has me like vibrating in the bed, trying not to wake up my wife. And, there's a scene very early in this book where Grandpa is at a diner with Marcus and Carter, and they're ordering. And just the process of ordering, Grandpa orders something wickedly unhealthy, and Marcus is ordering an omelet with, egg whites and spinach, and, there's a little needling go on, and Carter just comes in and without even checking just says, I'll have what he's having. And, he basically says, you know what, Grandpa's never steered me wrong. And thematically, the fact that, he's never steered me wrong, it's nice that a young African-American man and an old Italian man who in the first book, was still dealing with race issues and, can connect to a level where, they are part of the family now. And they can, joke about the stuff, kind of at the same level. So that kind of resonates a little bit. But they were just.
Thank you, Bob. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, I hope so too. And it's really amazing some of the stuff that I've written that's based on, real life. And I have this play, Father-Son Outing, which is, my friend Carlos called me up about his son, who he was worried, not worried. He always thought his son was gay, and that's fine. He didn't want to pry. He wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to support him. He had no problem if he was gay, but his kid wasn't telling him anything. And his kid was looking at pictures of like men in bathing suits, and was kind of freaking him out a little bit. And he's driving in his car and he's telling me about this, and I gave him some suggestions, some advice of what to read and what to talk to, and that was it. But then like this thing just kept coming back in my head. I continued the story, and basically I had this guy waking up in a hospital, all bandaged up, and he's actually handcuffed to the bed. and his son is in the room waiting for him to come out of his coma or whatever. And the father has no idea what happened. And as it turned out, it starts with the story that I just described to you. And he lost control of his car. And then when they checked his phone, they saw these images and they had him arrested for child pornography. And it's this really, really sweet, touching story about the son and the father talking about what happened, and that it's going to be okay because they pieced together the story. But the idea that it's like, yeah, I called your Uncle Bobby, and it's just like, really? That's your brain trust? Now I can see why this happened. And it's just this really sweet story. And I did a reading of it and it went really well. And it doesn't actually divulge at the end whether the kid is gay or not. And people really like that. But it was just about a father and son, but it's based on something that really happened. I have this other play that's a very, very serious play about an abortion that took place in this area at Dorothea Dix Mental Hospital in the early 70s. I have a friend in Florida whose husband was going to school here. They had 2 kids, and she was forced to get an abortion illegally and was declared insane because that was the only way you could legally get an abortion during that time. Basically, she told me this story once, and I was horrified. But I did some research, and I actually kind of wrote a play about it. And this one was stylized with, the play goes back and forth. There's 2 rooms. There's a room with leather chairs and a fancy office with 3 men in it, and there's a hospital room with 3 women in it, 2 nurses and the woman getting the abortion. And it goes back and forth and juxtaposes the circumstance of how this happened, and you are able to piece together by the going back and forth that these guys are smoking cigars and paying off, the guy who runs the asylum to basically do something that they think is righteous because it allows somebody to get an abortion without breaking the law. But the woman did not want to have an abortion, and it was just, a heavy duty story. I was actually going to do a reading of a couple plays if we were in person, but unfortunately we can't do that. The other thing about the playwriting is I have had, I don't know, about 35 plays performed professionally in at least 3 continents and a few countries. And it's really kind of neat. I mean, you can't make any money doing that either, but unfortunately now, like when you send out plays, first of all, so many people are doing it that now everybody wants money as a reading fee, $5, $10, $25. When they're getting 250 plays and they're going to do 10, statistically, it's like, it's just not worth it. You just, you can't do it. Plus, there came a time about 2 years ago, and again, I hate to use the word cancel culture because most of that is actually appropriate, but people who were reading plays were no longer saying, I get this, I like this is edgy but good. They're thinking to themselves, do I know somebody who knows somebody who might be offended? And maybe we shouldn't touch that. I mean, I have a play called Checking All the Boxes, which I did, a year or so ago in a play group here. And I mean, it absolutely killed. And it's, again, based on a true story. I had an HR director where I used to work, and he came in one day and said, oh, you ought to hire this guy. He sounds black. I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with you? Okay, that's him. He's got boxes he has to check. Then 3 weeks later, when we're about to offer the guy a job, same guy comes running and says, you better be sure because you'll never be able to get rid of him. I'm like, are you nuts? And it was just something we laughed off. But basically, I wrote this play about a company that is interviewing a guy for a job who basically the HR guy is there. And this guy, this candidate, is checking all the boxes. And it turns out while they're interviewing him, he's of color, he's got parentage stuff, he's got gender stuff, everything that from a equal opportunity level, which is just so inappropriate and shallow, he's just could not be more excited, and he just keeps checking off these boxes. Every time the guy says something about himself, he's just could not be more excited. And then at the end, some twist happens that causes the guy not to get the job. But it was absolutely hilarious. And like the racial stuff that I write. I mean, I have a play called "Guess Who's Coming to Sunday Dinner," where a woman of mixed race comes home to her Black father and white mother and brings a guy home for Sunday dinner. And, they are not expecting much. Well, it turns out the guy she brings home is Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback who was kneeling and got banned. And I mean, it's hilarious, but also I did a lot of research, and the father, who was a veteran, is debating back and forth, and they're, discussing this. And after we did the play, people are like, wow, I have to change my thinking on this. I really learned something, which is always pretty important and powerful. And, I have another one called 3/5, which is basically a comedic way of showing the racism in the Constitution. There's 3 characters. It's James Madison and 2 slaves, and he's bouncing ideas off of them because he's writing the Constitution, including the 3/5 portion about representation. And he's kind of got writer's block, and he's a little bit, dim in terms of not getting that these guys find this offensive. And it's very funny, but it's very well done, and it really exposes, a lot of the racism in our culture. And I did it in a very, very mixed room, and people loved it and said, "Oh, this has got to be on stage." And it's like, you know what? Can't get this on stage. People just are afraid. They just are worried somebody's going to complain. So the arts are not what they used to be. Also, it's a little difficult. Also, I found it interesting that Alice kind of was liked a line in a movie about a cannibal, which again, Hannibal Lecter is definitely a snob, but I probably would put cannibal first in the description about him. But you seem to, really be into that whole cannibal thing.
Well, he's Clarice's mentor.
Yeah,
It's not just, don't put him in a box. That's what you're putting Hannibal in a box. He's many things, and he helps her solve the case.
That's true. It's true.
Yeah. And
And
she
no
looks
one's all
past that.
bad.
Yeah, Clarice looks past that stuff. He's like, oh, well, that's cannibal schmannibal,
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a cannibal with morals.
Yeah, that's true. He's got a code, like Grandpa. He's got a code.
Yeah. Who's a badass. Who's so funny. That's and just everything he does is measured, and he's 83, and here he is having shipboard romances, a lot of shipboard romances.
And it's just funny because a lot of the stuff in here kind of happened as I was going along. Like, the Fed at the end, he wasn't incompetent or hapless, but had some problems that, he didn't understand himself because he's following the rules. And he gets a really great education from Grandpa about, how to how to do the stuff, and how to be a better federal agent even.
Right.
So, that was kind of fun.
Well, folks, what other questions do you have about Bob? Novel, anything about playwriting? Now's your chance.
Or about COVID, since I know more about that too.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, I have a compliment for you. First of all, I've been on a couple of cruises, and you do describe it perfectly. And I think that I'd love to go on a cruise with you because you sound like really, really fun. And also, as a woman reading the book, I found it interesting because I definitely thought the male sexual kind of thing, or were written by a male. They seem kind of like fantasy-like to me. All of the things that happened to Elmo with Elmo.
Right.
Yeah. So as I was reading it, I was thinking, yes, I can tell that man certainly wrote this. But anyway, no, I agree. It was a very fun book. I had a great time reading it, and you seem like a really fun guy, like all those pictures of you on the cruise. So get better. We'd love to take a cruise with you in the future sometime, because I think you'd make it a lot of fun.
We absolutely have a blast. Like I in Florida, I work with this fella Ed, who took all the pictures of me doing goofy stuff on the cruise. And he and his partner Hugh, they were pretty regular cruisers, and we went once on a cruise with them, and we just had such a blast. We've been cruising with them ever since, with our kids and without our kids. And it's the kind of thing where you plan a thing and says, we don't have to do everything together. There's plenty to do, but we'll, eat together, whatever. We just happen to be on such the same vibe that we go to the shows, we do everything, we like the same things. But even the stuff about, judging what people are wearing, and judging what people are wearing, and people dressed up versus down, and all of those things are stuff that we would talk about and we would do, and we would sit in the main area there and watch people walk by and judge them. And we just even the band at in the upstairs place doing the show for the cruise singers at the end, we always make sure we do that regularly. The trivia we do, I got more medals from trivia on cruises than you could imagine.
Well, my husband has won a couple of those as well. He's very, very good with trivia, and we've only been on Carnival cruise, but yeah, we have a couple of the Carnival cruise trophies, and the last time I made him give one away to someone, because I said, we don't really need any more. So no, they are a lot of fun. I mean, we've always had a good time.
Yeah, and even when I was talking about a second book, I mean, I was at the beach with Ed. We used to go to the beach regularly, and it's like, well, maybe it's time to write another one. And he just said, well, how about on a cruise ship? It was like, huh, okay. And then, I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, I need some sort of crime, though. What are we going to do on a cruise ship? And she says, what about the art auction? I'm like, maybe. So I just get ideas talking to people, and it is kind of fun. But because we've been on so many cruises and noticed the different things, I also kind of like the idea that criminals seem to be able to recognize other criminals, and they're able to notice that stuff, while most people who are honest walk around life relatively clueless. They tend to trust everybody. And like even the beginning, there was no reason to think there was any problem here. And, Grandpa just explains, he says, well, we don't know there's a problem, but something is, seems fishy about this, and goes through a very, very plotting way of, figuring it out. So, that's, fun. I also like the fact that Elmo and also his coworker Donnie, who were real mopes in the first book, have turned their lives around and are doing much better. And that, it was very easy for, people to turn their back on them. And again, the fourth book is going to be in the wedding. There's definitely an engagement in the third book, which is also humorous, and it's very much based on my daughter's engagement. It's just a lot of lessons, a lot of fun. As I'm glad that people enjoyed it and laughed and got a break from all the heavy stuff that we see, because I just, I'm so tired of drama. I want things to be happy and light, and so. Again, I'm sure that there is somebody who's going to look and say, well, this gay stuff you shouldn't be writing, or this race stuff you shouldn't be writing, or this gender stuff you shouldn't be writing. It's funny. It's the first time I even thought about the sex scenes. And when I think about them, all four of the ones with Elmo were quite fantasy-like, the kind of thing that guys would be like, oh, it'd be crazy if this happened. That never ever happens. And the fact that there were 4 of them rushed together at one point, he's basically like, all right, whatever. And you know,
They
I
were
get,
written very well, Bob. They were very sexy.
yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah,
I,
good. Good
you
writing.
know, yeah, yeah, now that you mention it, I could definitely see that being male. But I guess the only thing worse would be to say, well, these must have been written by a female. I'd be like, oh, yikes. I mean, I'm sure I'd like to have a soft side, but not that soft. Um, and you know, I'm a big continuity person. So like, you know, writing this stuff is another thing that's very hard, is being consistent with everything. And you know, I read all 3 books relatively recently, just trying to get back into writing before I started this next project. And it's it requires a tremendous amount of focus, which I just didn't remember because I was younger and more focused back then. But um, I'm very pleased that I got almost everything right. Although I have to mention that, you know, in the 3rd book, there is a relatively small throwaway joke about between Marcus and Scotty, where Marcus makes a Jewish joke, which if you read the first 2 books, you know that Scotty is Jewish, and it's a real nothing thing. But it is not established when that joke takes place in the 3rd book that he is Jewish, and it sounds a lot more offensive if you read them out of sequence, which is like, geez, you know what? I didn't catch that. You know, but and I also did, you know, at one point in this book, Brad mentions that he's doing the law for his mother, but you know, she does not stay in the picture very long. So I have to go back to the 3rd book and see if you know, she's not living at the point where he says that, and I'm not completely sure if that is a continuity error or not. I'll have to look at it more carefully. But again, when I look at other people's stuff, I basically, you know, read all the stuff, and anything that gets me off the story. If I'm sitting there and listening to somebody's story and I stop and say, wait, why did they use that name? Why did they use that word? Or, I mean, somebody sent me this story recently, and it was very nice and very tight, a little romance. But at one point, they refer to a woman's husband has a debilitating ailment. And then later in the book, she passes away and he seems to be fine. And I was like, you know, I said to the author, I said, look, this is a very nice story. I have no complaints about it whatsoever, except just that one word, debilitating. When I got to the end of the story with the twist and saw that he was fine and she was dead, I immediately had to go back and look and say, something's not resonating right with me here, because I thought he was ill. And by using the word debilitating, that indicates something that's not going to get better. And then later he is better. And if he had used recovering from an accident or had an illness, but not specifying, the one single word debilitating actually made me go back and reread the story until I found it and pieced the whole thing together. And, you know, I want to avoid stuff like that. I want people to have to say, wait a second, didn't this happen before? Or who is this person? You know,
Hey
anything
Bob,
else?
let's take a group picture before we all leave. So if you have your cameras off, it's a good chance to turn them back on. And all right, everyone smile. All right, thanks everybody. That'll be posted later on Facebook. Carry on, Bob.
Yeah, and again, I would really like people to consider submitting stories for the shoe theories, or also I need a title too. Shoe stories seems a little, but you know, the cover will have a picture of the shoes, probably with something in the picture to indicate size, maybe a Matchbox car or something, and the back cover might, I can't put artwork in the book. That's just too much of a pain, but I might put the picture of Raymond even though it does not show, it cuts off before the shoes, but just to show the 2-year-old in the picture in the back where I have whatever the blurb is going to be. But in terms of a title, I haven't come up with anything. And you know, that's something we got to figure out as well. And